All right, welcome to today's verdict, where legal issues meet real-world consequences. Coming up after a Bronx toddler's fentanyl-related death, new legislation aims to make daycares safer. What does it mean for parents? We'll find out later on. And later, we speak about the raids and deportation that started back in February that spread not only fear but confusion to both legal and undocumented immigrants. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. All right, hello, welcome to today's verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, today's verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at BronxNet.tv. In 2023, a heartbreaking tragedy shook New York and the entire country. The death of one-year-old Nicholas Feliz Dominici from fentanyl poisoning at a Bronx daycare sparked outrage, grief, and urgent calls for change. Now, nearly 2 years later, a new bill aiming to prevent such tragedies has passed the state legislature. It would require daycare inspectors to be trained in identifying controlled substances, a potentially life-saving measure. The bill now awaits Governor Hochul's signature. Well, joining us to discuss this critical legislation is State Senator Gustavo Rivera. Senator, thanks for being here. This was a horrible, horrible tragedy. Maybe you could talk to the viewers a little bit about what happened and maybe the impetus for the bill.
Absolutely. So it was back in September 15th of 2023, as you stated earlier. And it was a daycare center, a scene like we see so many different places around the Bronx and around the city. A daycare center, kids are curious, so they will look around, and unfortunately and sadly and tragically, in this particular daycare center, the adults who were responsible for the children were irresponsible adults, and they had drugs that had been stored inside this facility, inside this daycare center, including fentanyl. There was exposure that happened for about 4 children, and one of them, Nicholas Dominici, unfortunately died that day. There were 3 other children that were also hospitalized, but it was something that certainly shocked many of us, and we certainly felt that we needed to respond to it right away.
By the way, what happened to the different players?
So the first thing that we have to say is that there's parts of the system that did work. I mean, we're going to talk about what we need to do to avert disaster like this in the future. But once the situation occurred, 3 individuals who were responsible were arrested, they were tried, and they have all been convicted. One for over 20 years and one for about 45 years. And these folks were held responsible for the terribly irresponsible act that they committed. But I should tell you that what happened next was talking with the parents. Nicholas's parents are wonderful community members who felt deeply that this should not happen to any other child. And so they worked along with a couple of us, including Councilmember Pierina Sanchez and myself, to come up with pieces of legislation that could actually address what they felt were the failures in the system that led to this happening. And so that is ultimately what this bill that we're going to talk about today came from. That's where
Let's talk about it. Tell me a little bit about the bill.
So the bill is one of 2 that we introduced, but one that has passed and hopefully is waiting for the governor's signature at this point. As you know, bills need to pass both the Senate and the Assembly. So this is a bill that is sponsored by me in the Senate and my colleague Amy Pullen, who is the chair of the Health Committee in the Assembly, over in the Assembly. And this bill, the one that passed and is waiting for the governor's signature, mandates training. It basically updates the training statute for inspectors. The way that it works is that in the case of the state of New York, we have the Office of Children and Family Services, OCFS, is a statewide office that sets standards for how daycare centers are to be run and are to be inspected. Then local agencies, in the case of the City of New York, DOHMH, or the Department of Health and Mental Health, they're the ones that actually manage the process of training and of sending inspectors.
Right. The boots on the ground.
Correct, okay. And making sure that it actually happens. So what the bill that we currently have passed would do is it would actually update the standards for training, specifically as it relates to substances, to controlled substances. So it basically would provide some standards so that inspectors would know what to look for, where to look for it, and be able to identify it, which is something that they currently don't have training for.
Well, what type of things are they looking for? Are they looking for colors of substances? Are they looking for smells? Are they bringing a dog with them to sniff it out?
Well, not a police dog per se. I mean, and I should state that the way that it works in these bills is that we create the standards at the state level, and the specifics of the training is specified as done by the agency. But we trust that the agency will get it right. But again, what they will do is, for example, looking for paraphernalia, looking for particular types of substances. They know what they look like, they know what they're stored in, etc. And so there would be like a series of categories of things that they would look for. But ultimately, it would be about training these inspectors to make sure that they know what to look for, so that this type of tragedy does not happen again.
And how do you train them? Do you take them into daycare centers and put little things all over the place and see if they can find out where they are?
Well, it would be the training again would be done by the actual agency itself.
Yeah.
In the case of the City of New York, Department of Health and Mental Health, the OHMH, and it would be an augmentation. I should make sure that you underline this. These are inspectors that are already trained.
They're already there.
They're already trained, and in many instances, they do their job really well to identify potential hazardous conditions for children that have nothing to do with controlled substances, and therefore be able to find that some places that should not be daycare centers are not daycare centers anymore. This would augment that training, so it would add to it the controlled substances training part of it.
You know, I talk to my son all the time about fentanyl and dangers, and because it really frightens me. Do you find there's an uptick in fentanyl-type deaths throughout the Bronx, or what?
That is around. Well, that's actually a reality around the country.
Yeah.
It is a type of easily manufactured drug that can be added to other drugs to augment their potency. So we see it. It's actually most of the supply that's out there on all sorts of things, whether it's heroin, cocaine, etc. It is. People should assume that things that are out and about, that if somebody's purchasing some illegal substances, they should assume that it's likely that there might be fentanyl in it.
It's really the strength of fentanyl, I guess. You know, when you mix it with something else.
Correct, and it's also the fact that when you have, I mean, certainly in the case of a child, when they're exposed to it and they've never been exposed to it in their life, it is potent and it can actually kill them, much like any opiate can kill someone who has not been exposed to it. But again, this is specifically to make sure that in the cases of daycare centers, that we can identify any type of, and I should also state something else. This is an exceedingly rare case, obviously. We have thousands of daycare centers that are operating every single day, completely obeying the law and keeping children safe. This would be an added bonus to inspectors so that they can make sure that as they're trying to identify situations or conditions in centers that might make it so that kids aren't safe, all sorts of conditions, this will be something added to it. So that's basically what this would do.
And I know it's your bill and you sponsored it, and the viewers are very happy about that, but does it also deal with penalties for those who might get caught not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the daycare center?
It does not, and the reason we didn't believe that was necessary is clearly an example of the fact that the 3 individuals who are responsible were arrested, were charged, the process worked, and they have all been convicted as they needed to be because of their irresponsible actions that led to the death of this child, and the great damage that was done to these 3 other children. They're going to serve a good chunk of the rest of their lives in prison. They need to be held accountable, and they will be held accountable, and the system has worked for them. The parents actually, Nicholas's parents were very specific about this. They wanted to make sure they were glad that the folks were identified as quickly as they were, that the process functioned, and that these folks would be held accountable. They wanted to make sure that it wouldn't happen to any other child and to any other parent. And so they wanted for us to be specific about what are the conditions that need to be created. And I should state something else. So there's a second bill
Yeah.
that it's a little bit more expansive, and we hope that we can pass this bill in the future. It does not include the training. This is what the bill that is currently in the governor's desk relates to training of inspectors. But the bill that is more expansive also deals with education around harm reduction and overdose prevention. So in the rare case where there might be somebody who's a daycare worker or daycare center worker might see a child or somebody else having an overdose, that they can actually help to avert it. And it would include also, this other bill would include rights for the parents to be able to inspect any place that actually the children are, as well as a requirement that they have opioid antagonists like naloxone available in those daycare centers. That's the more expansive bill that we have yet to pass.
Well, that bill, let's say I was a parent, and it's I don't know, 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, you know what, let me just drop by and take a look and see what's going on. I'd be allowed to do that, just to kind of walk around and inspect, really?
Well, it is my sense that currently there is no stated specific right of a parent to be able to do that. It is likely that in most cases you as a parent already have a relationship with the caregiver, and that most caregivers would be open to saying, yes, of course, come in by and see every room that children are going to be in, so that you can be sure that they're safe there. It is my sense that is probably happening in most instances. But we wanted to create a particular right for parents to be able to do that, and for there to be a clearly identified, like a little poster that basically would inform parents of that right, which would be a requirement during the second bill.
You know what, I would assume, putting on my legal hat, that there would be some type of legal protections for either the teachers or the staff or somebody who's trying to revive a child or another adult who's there. I would assume that there's something in there to protect them.
Yeah, it would be the same situation that would happen right now if you were to be walking around like some people carry around naloxone to be able to provide to people who have overdoses. There are protections that are available for those folks to try to save somebody else's life. The same protections would apply.
Let me ask you a question. We really don't have too much time, but the political climate now, when it comes to being a little bit more community friendly and whether it's immigration or something else, hasn't really been the best for our city lately. We've been under a lot of pressure. Do you think the pendulum is going to swing a little bit more back to a democratic type of view of things, in terms of where we're caring more about people in the Bronx and issues, or do you think we're kind of moving closer to a conservative?
Well, I would say in this particular issue, which is one that I care deeply about, I think when we're talking about addiction, we're talking about overdoses, and we're talking about overdose prevention, it is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart, something that I've been working on for a long time. I believe that if somebody has an addiction that is a disease and must be dealt with as a public health issue, if we could criminalize our way out of an addiction crisis or an overdose crisis, we would have done it already.
Yeah.
I think that we need to be more compassionate in the way that we deal with it.
Should be a bipartisan type of
I believe
issue.
so. And certainly, listen, if in the case again of the individuals who were responsible for Nicholas's death, they were responsible for doing something incredibly heinous, leaving a substance which could lead to a child's death, and it did, available for children to play with. These folks have been, again, they were arrested, they were tried, they were convicted, and they will be held accountable for their actions. But broader speaking, when we're talking about drug use and addiction and overdoses, criminalizing our way to curing it is an impossibility. We could have a whole long conversation about that, and I'm sure we will.
We'd like to have you back,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can discuss this further maybe in a couple of months. But thanks very much for being here.
Absolutely.
All right, don't go anywhere, because today's verdict will be right back after this.
We're gonna start the show right now. This is my favorite part. Ready in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, this is Angel, and I am one of the instructors for the in-studio production. Here at BronxNet, we offer classes that can help you elevate, expand, and start your television career. All you have to do is sign up at bronxnet.org/education. For the past 7 years, I have been in various productions, spanning from talk shows, independent films, news reports, art displays, teachings, musical performances, and many more. Ain't that right, Angel? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Angel. There are a lot of creative individuals that we're just waiting to sign up for the class. And if I may, can I also express thank you, Angel. That's all the time we have left. Visit bronxnet.org/education and become a producer by taking the course. The class I offer is also in English, en español y también bilingüe. Nos vemos en la próxima clase.
All right, welcome back. We would like to take the time to look back at an interview with Lymari Casta, who's an immigration attorney at the Casta Law Office. Let's take a look. Fear and confusion is the reaction throughout our immigrant community. The ICE raids have begun. We have with us today Lymari Casta, returning to the show. Lymari, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back.
It's our pleasure. We love having you. What's the word on the street? What's people afraid, or people scared, or people happy? You're an immigration attorney, so you have your ear to the ground.
From where I have been meeting with immigrants and talking to them and people that called my office, there is a nationwide state of panic at this moment because of all the things that are being shown in the media, in the news, regarding raids, executive actions, and the ever narrative of mass deportation of everybody that is here undocumented.
Let me ask you a question. Did you see this coming at all? You've been practicing immigration law for a long time. And I know you've been doing everything from H-1 visas to green cards. Did you ever think you were going to have a situation that you would see in your lifetime where in New York City, in the borough of the Bronx, that there would be raids throughout the communities picking up people who were not documented?
To tell you the truth, this is not the first time it happens. I think this is the first time that it has been done so publicly, and a lot of media attention has been given to them. But it has happened before. The law has not changed in that sense. A person that is here without immigration status could be picked up by the authorities and detained. The law has been expanded this time in the sense that if a person has been here for less than 2 years, could be actually put in expedite removal proceedings instead of seeing a judge. That has expanded, but the law that says that somebody could be picked up and detained because they don't have immigration status, that has not changed.
All right, so let's say somebody's on the street and they're approached by an ICE agent. And the first thing the ICE agent says is, are you such and such, your name, or whoever you are? What does a person do when they're approached? Initially, when the first time they're approached, what do they do?
So it actually also depends where you find yourself. If you're actually on the street, obviously be respectful. You could say to the officer, I would like to remain silent. And you can also ask them, am I under arrest? And if they say no, you can ask them politely, am I afraid? Am I free to go? And you don't have to answer any questions regarding your immigration status or how you came into this country or what is your nationality. You can refuse to answer and say that you would like to remain silent and that you would like to speak to an attorney.
All right, let me ask you a question. So let's say you have a past arrest. I'm not saying a conviction, it's just an arrest. You hasn't gone to court yet. You haven't had any convictions. How worried should you be that you were just merely arrested in terms of being picked up and deported? Well,
that's a very good question because and this is not an act or an executive order passed by this current administration. It is something that happened to have passed this year, which is an act which says that if anybody has been arrested for robbery, burglary, theft, even shoplifting, you can actually be arrested and detained and be subject to mandatory detention. So this is a big change in immigration law because this really has never happened before, where you, without an actual charge, you just had to be arrested. So no conviction, it could have been dismissed, you could be subject to this. And I think if you have any criminal history, even an arrest, you should be contacted an immigration attorney to discuss what is your vulnerability, your risks, so that you can be better prepared.
Well, that's very important, actually. What would you say your vulnerability or your risk is? Does it depend on what you were arrested for? Does it depend what country you're from? Does it depend what you do for a living? How would you rate the vulnerability based on someone who comes and sees you?
Well, immigration law it's very complex, and every crime and could have a different outcome depending on the jurisdiction that you are, what your sentence was, how long ago was the arrest. What it's important to know is that for immigration, usually it doesn't matter how long ago it was, you still have to disclose it, and it may have consequences forever for you. So it's very important that you discuss this with somebody that is an expert in this matter, that knows that can analyze for you the consequences of your criminal history.
Let's say you're undocumented, but you have an arrest in your background. Would you recommend to that person who you're talking to that they actually volunteer themselves to ICE, or do you recommend that they try and get the arrest off their record or something? How do you approach someone who comes to you who is vulnerable? How do you advise them?
Right. So first, we will analyze to see if they qualify for any kind of relief under the immigration law. If their arrest record or their criminal conviction record does not allow them, or it makes it very difficult for them to legalize their status, we advise that they go to a criminal attorney, defense attorney, to see if there's a possibility of post-conviction relief. So to analyze if there was a mistake in your case, that the case could be reopened and that conviction be set aside and then they can come back and see if we can go forward with the immigration case.
I'm not even sure I can ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there places you can go that you're safer than other places? In other words, are there places you have to watch out for, and you shouldn't be loitering in that area where there would be ICE agents? Where are you the most vulnerable? Courthouses, schools?
Well, this administration said that pretty much no place is safe, in the sense that there are instructions that they could go arrest somebody near a school, near the courts. Obviously, and the instructions said you use common sense, right? And so your house is a place where you are safe because you have constitutional rights, where somebody cannot come into your house without your permission. So I think your house is one of the safest place. Apparently schools are not, at least the vicinity of a school is not longer a place where you are completely safe. In the past, schools and churches, at least the vicinity of it, were places where ICE would not touch or would not come in, but that doesn't seem to be the practice anymore.
Once they see you and you take the steps to now document them, whatever the initial filing might be, does that protect them?
Good question. So again, the law is very clear. If you're here undocumented, if you're here with no immigration status, you could be picked up and detained. Now, it could be that if you have a case pending, they will leave you alone, but it's still too early to know. We have not heard from the people that have been part of this raid's arrest, but I do recommend to anybody that has a case pending, carry the receipt with you, carry your approval notice with you. And when I mean approval notice, sometimes to get immigration status, there's a couple of steps. So maybe they got their first step approved, and maybe that doesn't give them status, but at least it shows an ICE officer that you are in the process of legalizing your immigration status.
You know, that's just great advice. It's just the effort. You know, sometimes the ICE agents would probably want to see the effort that you've taken to become a U.S. citizen and to let everybody know you're on our radar, and you can take these papers that you've either filed or you were going to file, and you fold them up and you put them in your wallet or wherever it is, and you make sure you always have that with you. I mean, it sounds a little bit, you know, like you have papers. You have to show your papers. You know, back in the early 40s, you had to do that. In Germany and other places, you had to show your papers. Our country's not based on that on that fear. Basically, we allow you to be able to roam freely, and unless there's probable cause, you don't have to tell anybody who you are. But in this situation, I would think it would be advisable that they have these papers with them wherever they go, so they can always pull it out.
Right. And again, we cannot guarantee that that will avoid the arrest, but it's worth the try. I mean, we know that in some of the raids, U.S. citizens and U.S. legal permanent residents have been arrested or part of this raid. I wonder if they didn't have their green card, the one that was a legal permanent resident. A U.S. citizen doesn't have to show that they are a U.S. citizen, but having proved that you are, it certainly cannot hurt.
Listen, there are a lot of people who watch the show, and I'm sure there are some people who are watching this right now and are very afraid. So where do they find you? Because you might get the phone call very quickly.
Yes, you can call our office at 718-798-0188. And it's very important, I want to say to everybody, that you do find legal advice now. Do not wait until you get arrested. It might be too late. There are not enough immigration attorneys for all the people that need the help. So securing an attorney at this stage, even if you have not been arrested, it's a very good idea.
That's great. Great advice. You know, a lot of times people call my office, and the one thing I always say to them is, whatever you're doing, document it, write it down, you know, have something in writing so you can prove it. But I think with respect to this particular issue, the most important thing you can do is go see an immigration attorney quickly to protect yourself. And Lymari, I want to thank you very much. We always love having you on.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out on YouTube. Also remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see in a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesh, and make sure to hashtag #AskToday'sVerdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. You take care.